Well, Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hey man, thank you for allowing me to come on your show, man. You're doing a great job. Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, it's one of those things I keep hearing your name in different circles, which is a good thing. Always
I was
positive.
Say, is that a good thing or?
Yeah, let me point out it's always been positive.
Okay.
And so I thought, you know what, I'd reach out to you and we'll get more into what you do. And obviously I'll make sure the listeners check out what you're doing at CJEvolution podcast, or CJEvolution.com, but we'll get more into that in a minute.
Appreciate it.
Let's start with the questions I kind of like to ask everybody. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, man.
Believe it or not, I get tea. I know on a law enforcement show, you think it would always be coffee.
I like tea too, but I've always been, and I got hooked on coffee in the military. And, for military people out there, you probably know what I'm talking about, but I love coffee. I love mushroom coffee, to be exact. I mean, I don't know if you ever heard of that, buddy, but it's mushroom coffee. It's not the weird mushrooms, but
right.
It's actually the good mushrooms. And I love coffee, and I drink other coffee, but I love the mushroom coffee.
Very cool. I have not personally tried it. You're the second person to tell me that though. So I will have to try it.
It is so good. And it's, again, it doesn't taste like coffee. I mean, or it doesn't taste like mushrooms. Obviously it tastes like regular coffee. So I just love it. And I think it's a little bit better for you.
Okay. I'll definitely check it out. So do you have a favorite place to have that cup of coffee? Maybe a place of serenity, just someplace you can enjoy that coffee in the morning?
That's a great question, brother. And you mentioned serenity. I mean, I get up every morning, start my day off in attitude of gratitude. Before I even get out of the bed, I'm thanking God that I have all this great stuff in my life, not just stuff, but people mainly.
Yeah.
Stuff is just, the secondary. But to answer your question, I go down with my wife and we sit in front of a big, huge window we have looking outside, and we just sip our coffee. We just kind of soak in the morning and get ready for the day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I find that's one of the reasons I asked that question is I love that about coffee, being an avid drinker of coffee myself.
Oh, yeah.
That there's always seems to be a moment, even on the most stressful of days, where you can just sit there and enjoy it and enjoy what's going on around you.
Yeah, I mean, I have those stressful days too, but I just love, like you alluded to, just kind of enjoying the coffee. You know what I mean? Not, running and on the go. And I have those days too, but I just love it having those days where you're just taking it all in, man. Enjoying the coffee.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, you got a best or worst travel story?
Wow. These are a best or worst travel story. My wife and I went to Napa about a year and a half ago. I love golf. I'm a big golfer. So we were watching, I don't know if you like golf, for the listeners, imagine some of the listeners do, but
absolutely.
The Safeway Classic is out in Napa, California. And so I took my wife to her first golf tournament ever. I've seen many golf tournaments, but first professional golf tournament in Napa at the Silverado Golf Club. That's where they have this Safeway Classic. So that was a really, really good. I don't know if it's the best, but it's up there. And then I remember one of the worst trips I was on. We were taking the family, kids were younger, and the flight for our trip to Mexico, to Cancun. We got there late, missed the plane. Then we overslept for the second plane, missed that plane. And that turned into a nightmare. That was a worse trip.
It sounds like it.
So, especially with small kids. So
yeah,
that was a bad trip, but overall our trips, our kids are all out of the house now. So it's my wife and I. And so when we travel, we have a good time, and they're all good trips.
It's awesome. Yeah. And I find, we've all had those stories. So it's always fun to hear people's, I guess that's just part of
life. It's life, man. Exactly. I mean, it's life.
So tell us a little bit about you, what you've done. I just learned today, I was actually listening to your interview with John Dumas, and I heard that you were in the service. So tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you to law enforcement.
Yeah, great question. JLD is an amazing guy. He's doing so much good in the world. But yeah, my name's Pat Fitzgibbons again, and thanks for having me on your show again, brother. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, I'm retired from law enforcement in 2019 after 23 years in service. Prior to that, I was in the military for a while. I was jumping out of perfectly good airplanes with the 82nd Airborne down at Fort Bragg. Knew that, well, I was probably going to stay in, just a side note, but I had a young daughter at the time. My daughter was born in 94, and my reenlistment window came up, and my wife said, I can't take this anymore. It's a rapid, for those of you who know, 80 seconds, a rapid deployment unit anywhere in the world in 18 hours. So I decided to get out. I have some cop blood running through my body. I have family members that were Chicago cops, and always knew deep down that I wanted to become a cop. So came back to the great state of Colorado and started on my law enforcement career. And like I said, did 23 years and just had a great career, ups and downs like any career, you probably know.
Oh, yeah.
Started out on the patrol and ended up as an operations commander in my department. That's what I retired as. And about 5 years ago, started the podcast you mentioned, Criminal Justice Evolution, CJEvolution. And it's been going great, man. I have just amazing guests on the show, and I want to continue to give back to the great profession that was good to me for so many years. And when I retired, I wrote a book, a little micro book called Evolve.
Okay.
And it's been a great ride, man. I've truly been blessed. It's not without problems, and every career has problems, ups and downs, but it really has been a great ride.
Well, that's what I love too, is part of the positive take, the few things that I've seen and read that you have done. I do have to quickly ask you, is Evolve on the name of that book an acronym?
It is an acronym.
Okay. What does it stand for? Because I didn't find it on that section without.
Yeah. So Evolve is Evolve, EVOLVE. And then the first one is Elevate. So elevate your thinking, your mindset. That's the E. So I'm a big mindfulness kind of person. I love meditation. I think that in order for us to get to a better place, every person can do it, but you have to shift your mindset. So what I mean by that, brothers, if you're thinking negative thoughts, you're probably going to get negative thoughts in return. So if you're thinking positive thoughts, I'm a big believer in law of attraction, by the way, you're probably going to get positive back. So first of all is elevate your mindset. So next is visualization. I'm a big believer, again, in visualizing success. So I knew going back, before I started the podcast, I knew that I had a vision of a podcast. I had a vision of what I wanted it to be, the content, and I visualized it. And I know it sounds corny. A lot of people are listening going, what the hell is this guy talking about? But it really does work. Visualizing, you're probably going to manifest what you want. So O is others. I'm a big believer in who you hang out with is going to probably make who you are. So Jim Rohn, very famous guy, entrepreneur, long since passed away, but he had a famous saying. He had a lot of famous sayings, but one of them that really sticks out with me is you're the average of the 5 people you associate with. Yep. So it's others. You are who you associate with. If you want to hang out with the go-getters in law enforcement, the positive officers, you're probably going to be a positive officer. If you hang out with the negative guys that don't want to be there, and we call them rods, retired on duty,
yep,
then you're probably going to be one of those people. So again, L is love yourself. Look, if you don't love yourself, and not in a narcissistic, I'm better than everybody else way, but if you don't love yourself, and that means taking care of yourself, how are you going to take care of anybody else? So L is love. I mean, you've probably heard this before, brother, and a lot of your listeners is, you're on a plane, the oxygen mask drops down. It's not my saying, but it's been around for a while. Who do you put the oxygen mask on first? You, right? So if you're not taking care of yourself, how are you going to take care of others? And in law enforcement, it's critical. You have to take care of yourself. V, victories. Celebrate those victories. You have victories every day that you need to be celebrating. That goes into that gratitude I was talking about. You're alive, right? You're breathing. Celebrate those victories. You have so much to celebrate and be grateful for. And E, every day, be your best. So that's the acronym. And I talk about that in my coaching a lot. I wrote the book in 2019. It's a little micro book. It's about 60 something pages. And again, it was a great time writing it and getting it out to law enforcement.
Very powerful. Yeah. And I will definitely link all that up. And the way the title's written with there, I figured you went through it in the book, but I definitely wanted to hear how that acronym broke down. So that's powerful, powerful stuff. We'll get back to that in a minute. Let me back up just a minute. So obviously you had mentioned several of the things ending in command, but throughout your career, then did you kind of go into criminal investigations as well as the road, or did you kind of have a main focus? Or
well, I started out in patrol. I did a lot of years on patrol. I was a patrol supervisor before I was a patrol supervisor, I was a detective for a while, a patrol supervisor. So I had, a lot of different experience in a lot of different areas. I just ended up in command. And it was a great ride, but quite frankly, I always tell people the best time I ever had, I'm not knocking command physicians because I was one of them. The best time I ever had was being a parole officer. That was the
Yeah.
most fun I ever had, on the street, just being on the street.
So when you were talking about the different things that you were doing at the agency there, I know you'd said you'd had a lot of different facets. Do you think that some of those roles in those leadership roles that you had throughout there kind of feed into what you're doing now and some of the lessons? I know you just went through that acronym that became the book, but were those lessons learned while working in law enforcement?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a big part of my lessons were learned in law enforcement, but part of that, I think the foundation was, well, let me back up. I learned a lot of these foundations through my father, who was a career military officer. He was a JAG officer in the military. So I learned some of this through him. I built and took that with me in the military. So I further built that foundation. But yes, absolutely. I mean, the majority of it was in law enforcement. And I just had that solid foundation going into law enforcement from the military. But every position I had, brother, just built on it. And again, I'm blessed to have such a great career in law enforcement and learned so much, not just about leadership, but about myself, and the discovery I went on in 23 years.
That's wonderful. So let me take from there, because I'm going to go back to that question at the end. That's why I asked it again the way I did. Let's talk about that pivot. So I know you had talked about visualization in the book, which that's powerful. I've been listening a lot more to Ed Milet, another great podcaster, and he talks about a lot of the things you're just saying. In fact, I've been starting to bring a lot of them into what I do. And that's so powerful. But when did you know that you were going to do this after you retired? Were you still an officer? Was there a pivot there where you started doing some of this on the side, or did you wait till, okay, I'm retired now, what am I going to do for the next chapter of my life?
Are you asking me, when did I try to pivot my mindset, or?
Well, and had the movement towards starting the business. Did you do it while you were still in law enforcement, or did you?
I did it when I was still in law enforcement, brother. I retired. I didn't retire till 2019, which was a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But I started doing this probably, almost 6 years ago, and really knew, how to laser focus what I wanted to do after law enforcement. And I started the show when I was in law enforcement. So yeah, I started working on this, when I was still on the job. And as a matter of fact, that's a great question, because I tell officers, look, because a lot of officers out there are just lost. They don't know what they want to do, especially officers that are retiring. And so I tell officers that are kind of on the, tail end of their career, I mean, that still have a couple more years, figure out, I mean, some of them have it, set up and they know what they want to do, but a lot of them don't, in my opinion. So start working on this stuff now, because I think there's so many officers out there, brother, that are just pigeonholed into believing that they can't do anything else, that all they are is a cop and that's all they can do. You're a first responder, man. You run into danger when other people are running out. You can do anything in the world. So it all ties into that, mindset where I was talking about, and visualization. I mean, science proves it. Just don't take my word for it. Like you said, Ed Milet talks about it. I mean, there's science behind this and it works. You just got to get into the practice of doing it. So I knew, before I retired, where I wanted to go, the direction I wanted to take. I visualized it, and now it's happening. It continues to happen.
That's great. No, that's absolutely powerful. And I was curious about that. When did you start the business and the podcast? So about 6 years ago, you were saying?
Yeah, almost 6 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long, but it has been. I mean, I'm over 400 episodes. I think I'm at 406 or something now.
Yeah,
episodes.
It's in the 400s.
So it's again, I'm blessed, man, and I'm eternally grateful. And it's just been a wild ride, but I knew what I wanted to do, and that's what I'm saying. I keep hammering that home to people, is just, you got to get that visual in your head. I'm a big believer, and I know it sounds, corny to some people, vision boards. I mean, I have one right in front of me. I have one on my, wallpaper on my computer, my laptop. If you don't know what a vision board is,
I was going to say, break that down a little bit, would you, for our listeners? Because I'm familiar with them from listening to people like Ed Milet and so forth, but definitely take us a little further into that.
Yeah, vision boards are very powerful. Now, if you would have asked me this a couple of years ago, brother, I would have been, what are you talking about? But vision boards are quite simply a collage. Now you can do digital stuff with all the technology we have. So vision boards are just taking pictures, putting them on a cork board or something, again, at wallpaper, and just putting things that you want to see come to fruition in your life. For example, maybe you want to be debt-free. Well, have a picture of, what it looks like to be debt-free. Maybe you want a promotion in your agency. Okay, imagine what it's going to look like and put it on, on your vision board of what it's going to be like. So you get the point. So put that out and make a vision board. Now, the key to this, brother, and for the listeners, is that you just don't look at it. you have to feel it. You have to put emotion behind that. So what's it going to be like? How is it going to feel to get that promotion? So again, there's two parts of this. I mean, there's three. There's action, putting action behind it. There's visualizing, but you have to feel it. That's what
Yeah.
makes it click. I mean, it's one thing to look at a picture all day, but to actually feel those things happening, I know it sounds corny, but it works. You're going to manifest it in your life. Very powerful stuff. And again, this is stuff that I learned later on in life, and I wish I would have learned when I was younger.
Yes. Well, I think we all kind of wish that from time to time on different things. Well, and that's why I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that so often I think we hear it, and we're skeptical, cynics, all these catchwords. It just comes with the profession. So you hear these things, you're like, I don't know what that foo-foo stuff is. I don't need to worry about that. But it really is powerful. The thought process on that really, when you talk about tying it to your emotions, that I've heard people like Ed Milet talk about, is that he used the example of one of the affirmations that he'll say is that I'm a world-class athlete. Not that he actually is a world-class athlete, but he trains like a world-class athlete from the perspective of when on that morning that you don't feel like getting out of bed, reminding yourself, well, I'm an athlete. Athletes get their butt out of bed. Athletes eat right. So it kind of just changes the psyche. And I've seen that work in my own life as well.
Yeah. And if you look at when next time the Olympics are on, look at what they're saying when somebody's up there accepting a gold medal. A lot of times, even though maybe we forgot it or we don't catch it, is what do a lot of them say? I visualize this moment. I always visualize this moment of being up here getting the gold. Tiger Woods has said that throughout his career. I visualized winning the Masters. Any prominent athlete or any athlete, again, this stuff works. There's science behind it. They visualize it, but they put action behind it too. You can't just wish for something and hope it lands in your lap. You have to do the work. But the next time you're watching the Olympics or anything, Super Bowl's coming up, right?
Right.
I mean, I think Brady, whoever wins, Mahomes, Brady, I wonder if they're going to say, I've dreamt of this, or I've, dreamed of this moment again. And that's part of the visualization process. They're very, very good at visualizing what they want to accomplish.
Yeah, that's powerful. To that end, I know you mentioned when you were going over some of the evolved process, you mentioned meditation. That's another one that people just, they hear it. When they first hear it, they're like, that's Eastern mysticism, or it's not something I personally want to do, and they don't really understand it. Can you unpack that just a little bit?
Oh, man. The meditation, again, going back to my ignorance of what it was years ago, again, it could just be simply closing your eyes and just doing some breathing exercises, or it can be, sitting, doing it for long periods of time. I start my day off at least 10 minutes of meditation. Now there's all kinds of guided apps out there that you can do, I mean, just research it. There's Calm, there's Headspace, there's all kinds of stuff. But I usually just sit there with my Bose headphones on in peace and just meditate, control my breathing, do that for about 10 minutes and focus, clear my mind. And that's been a game changer for me, brother. And look, there's a reason why elite athletes, there's a reason why Navy SEALs, Spec Op community, special operations community, high performance athletes, NFL teams, there's a reason why they're all doing meditation, or they have a meditation practice. Maybe not all of them are doing, because it works.
Right.
It works. I have had numerous Navy SEALs on my show. I've had guys that hunted down bin Laden on my podcast. You know what they all say? Majority of them, 9 out of 10, they engage in meditation. Yeah. I had a Navy SEAL commander on my show a couple of weeks ago, John McCaskill, great guy. He's a Navy SEAL commander turned meditation coach and practitioner now. That's what he does.
Yeah.
So it does work. And again, I was a naysayer just, a handful of years ago. But for those officers out there that want to try to work on their stress and decompress, I would very fervently recommend a meditation practice. And again, it doesn't have to be an hour. It can be a couple minutes a day. And trust me, when you get into that habit, and I know at the beginning, it might feel like, oh, my mind is, trust me, man, dude, I am a mile a minute. I think, it's very hard for me to concentrate on one thing, or it used to be. It's a lot easier now because I know how to calm my mind. So it's do it, man. For the people out there that are kind of questioning meditation.
Absolutely.
It does work.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And I personally can attest to the listeners that this is definitely powerful. So let me ask, you kind of went through your journey, the time you had spent in the service. and the family members and so forth that all kind of spoke into your life and going into law enforcement. Looking back now that you're on the teaching side, because even I think you teach a little bit in the professorship as well, but with also what you're doing, podcasting, this is teaching really. And knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell yourself as an early officer, as that new day one recruit? You just came to the job. What would be the lesson that you would tell that young Patrick Fitzgibbons when he just got that new job at the PD?
That's such a great question. Have a good balance between work and family.
Okay.
You have to have a good balance. I made the mistake of, and again, I'm not, this is not a dig on law enforcement, but I think like most young officers, well, I shouldn't say most, let me just speak for myself. I was all in with law enforcement. Every overtime assignment that came around, I was in it. Every specialist, I was in it if I could do it, and if I got selected for it. And my point in that is my relationship suffered with my family. My wife, I got divorced after 20 years in law enforcement. A lot of that was my fault because I was one of those guys, live, breathe law enforcement. And again, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but if you have a family, I mean, I can't tell you how many baseball games I missed, how many, other things that I missed with my kids. And kids, as we all know, they grow up. Yep. And so I can't roll back the hands of time, but I would tell the young officer, myself, look, don't take things too seriously. And you got to, it's like any other relationship. You got to spend time at work and nurture that law enforcement relationship, but you also got to balance it out with spending time with your family and your wife, because that is a big problem that I see with a lot of officers is they're all in with their profession, which again is good, but you have to be all in with your family too. And I made that mistake. So that's what I would give my advice to my younger one.
That's great. That's great advice too. And you're right. I've seen it personally, both when I first started, because I was a little bit older. I was in my early 30s when I came to law enforcement. So both what I was seeing with the younger people that I was working with, and then now as a supervisor, I couldn't agree with you more. Where do you see, we all know 2020 was what it was. Some might even call it a dumpster fire, but it was a tough year. And I say that in the general outside of our world, because actually personally, it was a pretty good year and there was a lot of good things that could have came out of it for people. But what do you see with law enforcement going forward? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on.
It's such a great question. It's a broad question. I mean, there's so many moving parts, as you know, in law enforcement, especially after the last year and a half. I mean, that's a great question, brother. I think, I mean, there's so many different, I worry about, getting rid of qualified immunity, as you know, for law enforcement. That's been the talk, and, for those people who don't know, qualified immunity is what protects officers if they're acting in good faith. That's not protecting officers that are doing illegal stuff. They don't get qualified immunity. But, activists are trying to chip away at qualified immunity. So to answer your question, I mean, there's so many different moving parts. I think we need to work on, recruitment, not only recruitment, but retaining, good officers. There's so many officers out there that are getting out of the profession. I mean, everybody I know is looking for maybe not everybody is looking for an exit ramp. So again, it's a very fluid situation. It's always been fluid, but I think we need to spend more time. I'd like to, you ask what's going to happen to law enforcement. I think we need to get a hold of these officer suicides. I mean, 2019 was a horrible year. I think 238 officers. I apologize for not knowing the exact stat. 21 or 2020, I'm sorry, 2019 were horrible years. 2021, we're already off to a horrible start. So again, maybe I'm not answering specifically your question, but law enforcement's a resilient profession, as you know. I think we can overcome anything, but we need to work together with we need to improve stuff that we could be doing better. We need to work with the community better. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with law enforcement. I wish I could give some rosy answer, but I encourage officers, that want to do it. I don't discourage officers that want to do it, but you really got to have a passion, same as before. But man, don't get in it for the money, because you're not going to get rich doing this stuff. You really got to have a passion to serve. But yeah, we got a lot of problems going into the future. We got, recruitment problems. We got, trust and legitimacy problems in certain communities. We have to, officer wellness is another big problem that we have. I think we need to be taking better care of our officers. So I do know that if we come together as community and law enforcement, that we can overcome pretty much anything. So we need to focus on that.
Well, that's what I like about what you're doing and a little bit of what we're doing and what others are starting to do. And that, I think that to me is the neatest thing, is that I'm seeing more and more people, in their own little sphere trying to reach out and do exactly these things you're talking about. But that's why I think it's so important, in my opinion, to work on the self first, because the more that you improve yourself, people are make up communities, communities make up countries, etc.
Yeah, and that's what, it always, it just reminded me, and you probably know this, and it always used to, crack me up when officers would come to me and say, well, how come I didn't get that training, or I wanted this education? Look, don't rely, and you made a good point, brother. Don't rely on the department for your educational needs and your training needs. There's so much training out there. The education doesn't stop with your department not sending you to training. Get creative. So you, like you said, I mean, you're in control of your future. You're in control of your education. The education doesn't stop at the classroom or because you can't go to that training. Get creative. Don't rely on other people to improve you. That's intrinsic. It should come from you. And I think a lot of people out there, they're just relying on other people, whether you're in law enforcement or not, to make them happy. The reality is you make yourself happy.
Right.
You don't rely on anybody else. Sure, we have spouses that we love and they make us happy, but deep down it comes from you, right? You can't,
Absolutely.
you have to, you control that. And that's why I love talking about what we were talking about before about mindfulness and gratitude, because that's the stuff that really turned my life around. That's the stuff that really jazzes me in the morning. And not that I don't live in a bubble and I have bad days. Of course I do. I'm human.
Right.
But overall, I have more good days than bad, because I'm happy. And that's, and I agree with you 100%, man. I mean, getting the more information out there, the more podcasts that are out there, the better. I don't look at another podcast as, oh my God, they're competition. I look at it as another way to get the information out to the brave men and women who protect us every day, yourself included.
Right.
The more information we have, the more awareness we bring of self-help and self-improvement, the better profession we're going to be. And in turn, the better we're going to serve our community.
Absolutely. I almost want to say amen at that point there, Patrick. That's really, really good stuff. So yeah, no, and I agree with you. When I've had other people that I've spoken to, and it's all this, I love this mindset that's kind of going around where they're talking about collaboration over competition. And I think that is really where we're at. I mean, there are so many podcasts out there since you started 6 years ago. I mean, there's
tons.
Yeah, there's tons. I can't believe how many there are now since I started 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So it just keeps, it's exponential. But like you said, everybody listens. Like, people are going to tie into a certain host that they like, or who has a guest that they like. And, they're going to follow multiple podcasts, and it's good for everybody, whether we're talking podcast or we're talking some other venture that's out there that's helping people be their best selves. So, so you have the book, and then you have the podcast, and then you also do coaching.
Yeah, I do some coaching. It hasn't been a lot lately due to COVID and things like that. And I've become a little bit busier, but I do coaching for first responders, mainly first responders, some military, since I'm ex-military. But the whole coaching philosophy and what I do a lot, my coaching is based on the book. So when I wrote the book, I tie it into my coaching, and I elaborate a lot more on the acronym we talked about. I incorporate that into my coaching program. I've coached senior executives in law enforcement. I've coached patrol officers, and it's, again, I tell people when we start coaching is, look, I don't have all the answers. I mean, I just give you the tools, a lot of the stuff I've learned along the way. It's up to you to take that first step. It's up to you. Don't rely on me to make you happy. You have to take the first step. I'm going to give you some of the tools that I've learned along the way to kind of help you on your journey. It's been a great ride, man. I'm truly blessed, to be in the space I'm in right now, and keep helping, first responders the best I can, and not just for first responders, but just the criminal justice field as a whole. And again, I'm just blessed.
So you teach, just out of curiosity, do you teach at an academy or at an actual collegiate level as well? You teach?
I teach at the University of Colorado, which is in Denver. And then there's University of Colorado Boulder. Actually, there's different campuses, but I teach at UCD Denver. I also teach at the Community College of Denver. And to answer your question about academies, I've taught and lectured in multiple academies on the Front Range of Colorado, last being Red Rocks Community College. But, I'd go in there and talk about resiliency and use of force stuff. Because I can talk about other topics, just as, just besides mindset and resiliency. But with COVID, as you know, I mean, it just put things on,
Oh yeah.
upside down. And, with academies now, it's become more and more problematic, because academies, you need in person. I mean, you can't with skills training and stuff like that. So I haven't been doing a lot of academy stuff, but hopefully this year, it's going to pick up again.
Yeah, no, I understand completely. We had the same thing. I teach at the academy level, and we were kind of going through the same thing. That's why I was curious what exactly you did there. Let me ask you, you threw out one of my favorite words. What does resiliency mean to you?
Oh, let me see. That means being malleable, being able to adapt, being able to take blows and get up and get back on that horse and keep going. But I do know you can't do it alone. I mean, in order to become more resilient, you need a good tribe around you, whatever you want to call it, crew. That's going to help you become more resilient. And again, that goes into that, that I was talking about in my book, the others. I mean, it's so important that we surround ourselves with people that are lifting us up, they're building us up. That's going to build our resiliency too.
Yep.
Resiliency again is overcoming those life obstacles. Look, I mean, we're always going to be, have life obstacles. The traffic lights of light are never going to be green at the same time. There's no perfect life. There's just life, but it's how you deal with that, and being resilient and developing resiliency is the key, one of the keys. And I haven't always been resilient. I mean, I took a long time to get to this point, and a lot of it is trial and error and suffering from depression and stuff like that. And again, a lot of people might, resonate with that. And there's a lot of people out there probably suffering, listening. Look, you need to seek help, and that's going to help you become more and more resilient, because life just keeps coming, man.
Yep.
Life just keeps coming. And whether it's personal or professional problems, we all have them. You need, the more resilient you are, the more you're apt to overcome. And that's why I love talking about mindset and gratitude, because that's really, and meditation, that's really helped me become more and more resilient the older I get.
That's wonderful. And I love how you talk about it being a process, because I think that's something that gets lost from time to time when we talk about these things. And maybe it's the culture, maybe it's, that whole, hey, if I got a problem, I go take a pill and everything's better and I just move on kind of thinking that we have. It's, American culture. But I love how you talk about it being a process, because it really is, it's something that, I've been working on for years, but I'll never be where I want to be. It's this continuous state of improvement, if you would, going forward.
Well, and I think that's the problem with, one of the problems with the kind of the society or the culture we live in, is we live in this instant gratification, society, where I have a problem, I just want it to be solved immediately. Like you said, take a pill for it. And the reality is you need to put in the work, you need to put action behind it. Lip talk is just lip talk. You need to put in the work and the action. No successful person out there, their life was perfect. Bill Gates didn't wake up one day and was suddenly a billionaire. No, he had failure and failure and failure. And same with Thomas Edison. You've heard the stories. I mean, all these famous people, these, people that we put on pedestals, and we think, some of us think, well, they never had any failure. It was always, no, they failed throughout life. The difference is they got up, and so many people, when they fail, they're not resilient enough to get up. They just stay down. And so that's a problem in our society. And there's many different reasons for that. But I mean, that's what I love talking about, because everybody has the power. I mean, you have the power to make your life better. The power has always been within you. But so many people just, live in mediocrity, or they just settle for a life that, they don't like, when not realizing that they have the power.
That's great. That's absolutely powerful. And I hope that the listeners are listening to this, and that in and of itself is something that could be life-changing for each and every person listening. Let me ask you, what does the future look like for you? What's anything on the horizon? Or
that's a great question. I get that a lot. I keep humming along with the podcast, and I'm growing that. I'm toying around with getting on radio. Okay. I got a lot of friends that are on radio, and kind of encouraged me to break into radio. So I'm looking at that. I'm also looking at another book, and talking about that, and writing out some ideas with another book. And I love continuing to teach, brother. I mean, there's one of the biggest, great, fulfilling things that I do is teaching and educating and mentoring the next generation of criminal justice professionals. That just brings a smile to my face. And I love teaching. I've been passionate. I've been teaching for well over a decade now. So to answer your question, do a lot more teaching and just living life, spending time with my family. But I got a lot of things in the hopper, man, and I'm just humming along, and the show continues to grow, and yeah, just having a good time.
That's great. I'm very excited to hear that. And I love seeing it because it's something that, and this isn't meant to be negative in any way, but there's other, sometimes the shows that get the most traction are the ones that don't have that positivity and don't have that, and I'm like, I really like seeing shows like yours where it lifts, elevates, because we see so much negativity out there.
Yeah, and I agree, and yeah, you hit it on the head. I mean, I do talk about some controversial topics every once in a while, but like you said, overall, my message is one of overall positivity and motivation and inspiration. The reason exactly what you said, brother. We see enough crap every day. I didn't want to give back to the law enforcement profession by talking about and complaining about and talking about negative stuff. I mean, cops see that enough. So I think I agree with you. I think there needs to be more shows talking about because there is a lot of positive. No matter what the media says or some media outlets say, there is a lot of positive about what we're doing. It's just like you said, we as a society tend to focus on the negative. I don't even watch the news anymore, brother. I turned that crap off a while ago. I don't even watch it. I mean, occasionally I'll scroll through a feed or Twitter or something and look at that. But I don't do it because it's all negative, and I understand that's what sells, but I just don't need that in my life all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had to do the same thing. In fact, I've talked about it on here a few times, what I call my social media hiatus or
your
news hiatus. But what I find, because I like politics, I like some of that stuff.
Oh, I do too.
If I start listening though to a lot of those type shows and reading that news, it does something emotional. It's the opposite of everything we've been talking about. The opposite of evolve, it would be de-evolution at that point.
Yeah. So I agree with you, man. There needs to be more shows, like yours, like mine. Just if you're teetering, if they're a listener out there, I'd just throw this out there, brother, if you let me. It's just for the
absolutely
for the listener out there who has an idea about bringing more positivity to law enforcement or just the criminal justice profession, do it. Right. Pull the trigger and do it. Start it. Because I think that's a great thing. We need to hear more of that. Look, I mean, officers are too depressed. They're committing suicide. They're suffering from PTSD, PTSI. So we need more positivity. We need more positive messages out there. So the more, the better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more. That's what we need, is to get more people out there with these messages. Yep. Let me ask you a question I kind of ask everyone, and you've touched on so many good things. So it's kind of summarizing here, but what is the one takeaway, the one thing that law enforcement officers can do? So boiling it down, because we've given them so many, that will make a difference in their personal lives.
I would say shift your mindset, like we've been talking about. I mean, again, in your personal lives, I mean, personal and professional, is a mind shift. Look, if you're happy, if overall happy, and you have an overall positive mindset, you're on the right track. But a lot of us don't. We know it. Be honest with yourself. I think in order to have a positive personal relationship, and I had to do this in my life, brother, is having a deep reflective conversation with yourself and being honest with yourself. And if your relationships are crappy, or if your relationship with your spouse, your kids is crappy, you need to own up to that. I know we're a proud profession. We got our egos, but own up to it. So that's the first thing. And then it's shifting your mindset and then practicing that gratitude, like we've been talking about. Trust me, it's going to change your life for the better, but you have to do the action. You have to take that first step. I think Martin Luther King said, it's that first step. Don't look at the staircase and, think just take that first step.
Yep.
Once you take that first step, the rest is going to happen.
Powerful stuff. Patrick, I really appreciate it. What is the best way? How can people connect with you?
Well, brother, thank you for having me on your show. Anything I can do for you and your success, please let me know. If people want to reach out to me, listen to my shows, they can find it all at CJEvolution.com.
I appreciate it. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on. You have a great evening.
You too, brother.